Hi everyone, well my name is Roz and today I talk about horse breeds and what makes you want to purchase a particular horse and why. And I discuss my own ideas and concepts and based on the many horses I've had over the years and why I have preferences for certain horses over other horses and each to their own of course. But, it's an interesting conversation and one that needs to be had. Also, I talk a little bit about if you're going to breed your horse, why would you breed her? And what are the purposes? And what are your aims and goals? Bella is a quarter horse mare with a bit of thoroughbred in the far background, which gives her that extra height and probably leg length. And Billy is a brumby of unknown breeding. If I was to make a calculated guess, I'd say he's got a bit of quarter horse, a bit of Percheron. Anything's really possible. He's come out of the Highland region of Victoria. I don't know with him, but he's certainly got a type that I like. Anyway, we'll talk about this because I think it's an interesting subject of what inspires you to certain breeds and why do you buy them, and what are you looking for. Personality type in a horse can also be a big issue. As you can see with Billy and Bella, they've got their own distinct personalities. Bill's very theatric, very extroverted in his personality type. Bella is introverted. So they actually suit each other in many ways, because I think if there was two extroverts, there'd be a lot more wars, because Bill, is very, I don't know if you'd use the word dominant, but everything he wears, all his emotions externally. And Bella's a brewer, but she will hold her own, which is nice to see. Otherwise, I think she'd end up being bullied. But these two complement each other. And I don't think I intentionally did this when I got both of them. But, personality type and how a horse's personality fits in with your own is also another important aspect when you're purchasing horses. When I'm actively looking for a horse to purchase, probably the number one thing for me is the eye. And I do that because I can remember my own father and grandfather always saying to me, you can tell a good horse by what's in their eye. And a gentle spirit, a good nature, a horse that's, relatively at peace with itself will have a good, kind, soft eye. A horse that's been traumatized or worried or is generally got a tougher character or, a angry personality, you'll see it in their eye as well. Bill's a really good one to watch facial expressions on, and Bella, because they really portray who they are and their personalities just by watching their eyes alone. And the hard thing is when you're purchasing a horse, especially if it's online, you cannot see what that horse's personality type is. Sometimes the only thing you can get a bit of a glimpse of is the eye. So again, each to their own, but for me, a kind, soft eye is a very big factor as to whether I would purchase a horse or not. Breed type is also another big issue when you're purchasing horse. I think we all have our own preferences. I've always liked quarter horses. They've been my thing. But I have to say, if I couldn't purchase a quarter horse, I'd probably go for a standard bred, because I love the character type on a standard bred. So again, for me, it's either conformation, character, or, if I was going for pure character and overall type, I'd go for a standard bred. And I know that sounds really strange because, a lot of people regard standard bred horses as, for the trots or the paces, for racing. But in my experience, The ones that I've had that I've ended up with rescue jobs, they've been fantastic horses, fantastic characters, safe and reliable. And, I spent many years riding a standard bred mare, and she was just the safest, kindest mare that you could ask for. Yes, she was a dominant mare in the paddock, but I tell you what, as a riding horse, she was brilliant. So we all have our preferences, but in terms of type, I am very much into quarter horses. I love the power, the quick movement. I love the character. If I was going out to purposely buy a horse, it'd probably be a quarter horse, or I'd go for a quarter horse crossed with a draft. And the reason I say that is I particularly like Bill's type. I particularly like Percherons, the heavy breeds. I'm not a fan of huge height these days because I'm too old and too little to climb on and off, but it's not because of their height, it's just because of my own limitations. Old age and climbing on and off things is no longer my forte, or coming off. If I was to have an accident, it's a much longer way down to the ground. Look, there's pros and cons for everybody, but overall, for me, I'm probably a quarter horse girl. In terms of type for brumbies, I got it lucky with Bill. I had no idea because he was young when we got him that he was going to turn into such a good conformation for me. He's very much the type to what I like. He's got a good strong body. He's short-backed. I don't like long-backed horses, even though I know that maybe a longer-backed horse has got more athleticism. Bill's very athletic. He doesn't have the speed of maybe Bella, who's got that thoroughbred in the background there. But for me personally, he's a bit chunky, which I like, short back, nice and rounded, good height of wither, nice lay of shoulder. Probably the downside, if I was going to pick a fault, would be his head carriage. He holds his head higher compared to Bella, who lowers her head. But for me, it's no big deal. I'm quite happy to have him hold his head slightly higher. He does drop it when we're, just walking. Again, as I said, we all have our own personal preferences. I know colour is a very big issue for many people, and one of the things I often see in the brumby world, especially with horses that have been brought out of the wild, is there's a lot of competition for the more colourful types, and it can get quite nasty actually, and which is disappointing to see because it should never really be about colour. It should always be about, in terms of brumbies, about rescuing them regardless of how beautiful or ugly they are. Especially if you'd seen Bill in the early days, he was no swan, that's for sure. But anyway, when it comes to choosing horses via auction online, you really are very limited because, of course, most people only present what they want you to see. And in terms of watching a 1 minute or less video of a horse or pictures of it, you can't tell. You really can't tell. And you just have to rely on that writing. The colour of the horse won't make it a better horse, no matter what people think. I think one of the big problems when it comes to purchasing brumbies is that people are not purchasing brumbies to use as riding horses. I think there's a motivation to get a hold of some of these brumbies for breeding purposes, so there's ulterior motives, and that becomes a problem because the whole reason brumbies are being culled at the moment is population numbers, and there's no checks and balances when it comes to breeding. And so how do you know whether you're inbreeding or you don't know whether there's genetic problems. There's all kinds of underlying issues that are involved, and you look. I know people often have really good intentions, but if you decide then to sell on the progeny and sell them as brumbies, which are not a breed. Brumby means wild horse, born in the wild. It does not mean breed or type. Brumbies can be of all kinds of breeds, all kinds of types, depending on the region they've come out of. So just purchasing a brumby on colour is not necessarily going to get you a good horse in the long run, because you have no idea what's going on in that brumby's mind. You have no idea whether it's going to be a suitable riding horse or not. So be careful and think long and hard about your own motives if you're going to purchase a brumby, and why you were purchasing one brumby over another, because in my experience colour means nothing. At the end of the day, what you should be looking at is the eye, conformation, watching. If you get the opportunity to look at a herd of brumbies going up for sale, have a look at their legs, have a look at where they position themselves, their curiosity. Look, there's so many factors that go into why you purchase a brumby or not. Look, if you're just after a paddock companion, that doesn't mean anything. But if you're after a brumby that will be a great riding horse and suitable for you to handle, depending on your experience, you really need to know what you're looking at and what you're looking for, and really working out what your intent is. So just because something's pretty doesn't mean it's going to be a good quality horse for you as an individual. And the reason I bring this up is that I see online and at auctions brumbies go through on a regular basis. And, for whatever reason, life circumstances, unfinished projects are always up online. And, or as I said, sent elsewhere. They end up on the sales merry-go-round simply because, they don't turn out to be what somebody expected. Usually, there's excuse of I just don't have the time anymore. But the truth is that brumby was never suitable for that person at the beginning. They tried to push through because the whole fantasy of the man from the snowy river, people want to play that out, or they've read the Silver Brumby series as kids and want to have their own Silver Brumby. And believe me, that fantasy still goes on today in the real world, with people desperately trying to get a hold of a brumby from particular regions for the kudos. Now, that doesn't work for the brumby. It only works for the person and their motivations. So think long and hard about why you're purchasing a brumby, what your ultimate aim is for it. And, don't purchase just for a project. Forgive me for my croaky voice before. I'm in the flare-up at the moment with Graves' disease, and it quite often affects my throat. Anyway, back to motivations for buying a brumby. When I purchased Bill, I didn't purchase him because he was a brumby. I purchased him because he needed rescuing, and he was close to death. So I was fortunate in the fact that he turned out to be a really good horse, but it took time and he had to grow up. He was only very young when we got him, so we didn't really know what he was going to turn out like. And we certainly never chose him, or I never chose him for colour. I don't really care about horse colours. I mean, like everyone, I love a pretty colour. But at the end of the day, the thing that drew me to Bill was his eye. He had a lovely, soft eye, and it was a sad eye. So that's what got my heartstrings, and I was stupid because I bought online, and after all these years' experience, I should never have bought a horse online, especially if I was looking for a riding horse. But that wasn't my reasoning back then. But if I was today to want to purchase a brumby or a quarter horse, you need to go in person. You need to ask the right questions. You need to watch that horse move. You need to see if what the seller is saying is the truth. If you're looking to breed your mare, which I may do at some point, you need to look at the progeny, the character. You need to know about the genetic flaws that are possibly there. There are so many things that you need to research and do before you purchase. That's what wisdom teaches you. If you're unwise and you're just desperate for a horse, then your motivations are not right in the first place, and you probably should not purchase, and definitely don't purchase a brumby. Important factors to take into consideration with brumbies also is that when they come out of the wild, they don't necessarily respect fencing. It took Bill probably maybe 2 years to really come to terms with having fences around him. On numerous occasions he tried to break out, got himself tangled in the fence, or would get out of the fence. You have to be prepared for the fact that brumbies will want to return to the wild, and they're not the same as purchasing a domestic or even an unhandled horse, because even unhandled horses usually are born with fences around them, and so they have a certain understanding or respect for them. So there's lots of little issues with brumbies. It can take time to build a bond with them, especially when it comes to trust. They can be very frightened of domestic situations because there's noises and actions that go on that they're just not used to. So you have to take into consideration that it's going to take longer for them to adjust to living in a domestic environment than a horse that's been bred in a domestic environment, is used to seeing people, used to seeing vehicles and dogs and cats and chickens and all that kind of stuff. So do take that into consideration if you're wanting to purchase a brumby. Otherwise, go for a domestic bred horse and think about what your long-term goals are. If you're an older rider, you might want to go for something that's a draft cross with a quarter horse. It's got, the strength, the sturdiness of temperament. If you're somebody who's wanting to get into endurance, maybe look at the Arabian breeds, the Arabian crosses. Just ask yourself what you want your horse for. Is it just to be a general pleasure horse to ride out on the trails? Is it to do a particular discipline? Are you just wanting a paddock ornament? And there's nothing wrong with that, might I add. There are plenty of people who choose to buy horses not because they want performance out of them, but they want companionship and love. And I really don't have a problem with that at all. I don't think that you have to buy a horse purely for riding. You can buy a horse as a companion. Well, there are a few of my thoughts. I hope that helps you if you're considering purchasing a horse or a wild horse, whether it be a brumby or a mustang. Anyway, I will discuss more on this at another video.